So Clay has a question about the what standard error is, and more of like defining and understanding what that is. Clay, what is your question?
What's the exact reason for converting standard deviation to standard error?
Okay. The reasoning is when you have your bell curve and you run your 10,000 iterations, it will give you your mean. Okay? And your mean value is based on all the situations that we ran, and we took an average of all of those. Okay? When we take that average, we get a certain value. But again, and in this case, it was about 201,000. When you look at it as a continuum of all of the possible results that can occur, you still have like risks or unknowns associated with every value within that bell curve. Okay? Now, you've got, if you were to take just the 201,000, if you take just the mean, because you ran the 10,000 simulations, it doesn't mean that your mean is absolutely there's not only one answer, and that's because you're running all of these different simulations. So so what he's asking is, with the mean, we've given you a mean based on your simulation. Now, how accurate is that 200,000? How accurate is that 201,000? And when you're looking at standard error, it's saying for that one point along the continuum, within all of the samples that you took, how confident do you feel that that is in fact your mean? You're not 100% confident. You can't be. So so what you do is you say, okay, I have my 5% and my 95%, and we're saying that between that, we are 90% positive that our mean is 201,000. When he asks for it on the test, he's saying, okay, so we're 90% confident, but what other values could that mean fall into? And so he's saying it could be 200,000. It could be 202,000. It could be 201. It could be 200.5. It could be 201.5. And so you're getting an understanding of just specifically that mean value. Just specifically that mean value, you are 90% sure that it's 201, but you're not 100% sure. You do. There is by how we did the problem and how we looked at it and came up to our mean. We're not absolutely sure, but we can have a pretty good reasonable assurance because we ran so many simulations that the actual mean is going to be somewhere within this range. We're 90% confident that our mean is somewhere within this range. That is what standard deviation, or that is what standard error is for any one particular value. And you can run this, it doesn't have to be your mean, you can run this on any statistic. You can run it on, your 75, you can run it specific to individual, you can run it to individual numbers that you pull out of this bell curve. So that is a little more in-depth into what standard error is and what he's looking for and what he's kind of asking for.
That wasn't really my question.
What was your question?
My question was why would you convert standard deviation to standard error? My question was actually what's the difference, what's the meaning of the difference between standard deviation and standard error? Because it gives you the standard deviation. My question, I said, what is the actual reason you would convert standard deviation to standard error?
So the calculation itself is,
you take this.
You take standard deviation divided by the square root of the number of samples.
Why do we do it? Why? Standard deviation kind of tells you the same thing, though.
It does. It's very similar. Only the only difference is when you're talking about.
I know that explanation. That's perfect. And to add on to your explanation, you're 90% sure it falls in that range.
Yes.
You're 90% sure it falls in that range.
So you're asking why do you convert it from standard deviation to?
Yes, you already have the standard deviation. What's the difference between them? Why It's just this is more. This is kind of more even more. This is kind of more in depth than standard deviation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you don't have to do a video about it, but in your words, tell me what standard deviation is relative to standard error. In other words, what's the difference? What does standard deviation tell you, and what does you just say what standard error tells you?
Okay.
What would you say standard deviation tells you?
Standard deviation is what for all of the samples that you ran. For all the samples that you ran, it's the variability of that entire population. Standard error is picking any particular value within that population and saying, I'm 95% confident, or I'm 90% confident that this value actually falls within this very tiny range.
Couldn't you do that with standard deviation also?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing, but it's like, think about it this way. It's one level lower. You're drilling into the information one level lower to talk about how confident you are that this value is actually this value.
I get it. I'm going to leave it alone because I know how to do it. Yeah, I get it. So, but it does give you the standard deviation, both positive, plus, and negative, and minus.
Yes.
And when you talk about the variability, you can just say standard. A lot of times you just use standard deviation to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost the similar. It's a different way of saying it.
It's a similar. Okay, so the statistic is similar. The statistic is similar, but it's on a different data set.
Yeah, I got it. No, I get it. No, I get it, bro.
Okay.